Hey folks, Healer here. Today is Friday, January 15th. Wargaming posted this article to the development blog announcing some of the content that they are planning for update 0.10.1, most notably early access to the new Italian battleship line. We also have announcement of the next season of Clan Battles. We have some updates on Brawls, which used to be called Clan Brawls, and there are a few other newsworthy items in the article. Again, everything on the blog is subject to change, so just keep that in mind as we go along here. Starting with the Italian battleships, we have the first part of the early access event for update 0.10.1. This will cover the tier 4 through tier 9 battleships. As is typically the case, the tier 10 battleship would not be part of early access. There's a brief summary of the main features of the Italian battleships, like they fire SAP shells instead of HE. They tend to have a fair number of guns with relatively quick turrets, relatively short firing range, and not very good accuracy. The ships have reasonably decent concealment and maneuverability, as well as good armor. And then lastly, starting at tier 8, the battleships pick up the exhaust smoke generator, which allows them to drop into concealment while maintaining their speed. This is the same smoke generator that the Italian cruisers receive. Now, in honor of the event, the Taranto port is being updated, and we will get a couple of different camouflages for the early access battleships. So for tier 6 and 7, they will receive the Roman camouflage, and for tiers 8 through 10, they will receive the Legion camouflage. And I'm curious whether this banner on top of the Legion camouflage will actually move in the wind while the ships are sailing around. So we'll have to see about that. And then next is an image of the Taranto port as it will appear for the event. So a very short update from Wargaming regarding this event. Obviously a lot more details to come. I just kind of see this as a teaser, but some at least initial plans to have the Italian battleships be available for early access in 0.10.1. So the next update is for Clan Battles. The next season is planned for February 24th through April 12th. This will be for tier 9 ships in a 7 versus 7 format. And what's most notable to me about that is no aircraft carriers. So I know this has been a very common complaint by many in the community to see aircraft carriers in Clan Battles. So this is probably going to be a refreshing change. Now, we will get obviously the details of the season later, but the main thing I think Wargaming wants to drive home in this article is some ideas that they are working on to essentially force teams to have more diverse teams in terms of the ship composition, rather than having sort of these very static metas that have developed over the last few seasons, of Clan Battles. I think the most egregious example was the season where the meta was one aircraft carrier, 5 or 6 Venezias, and the rest were Stalingrads. The gameplay became very dry, very static. There were a lot of complaints from the player base who participated in Clan Battles that it was quite unenjoyable to see such a sort of a stale playing experience. So I think this is partly to try to, like I said, sort of force teams into more dynamic structures in their teams. So all of the restrictions that are being proposed here as far as trying to improve the diversity are purely conceptual, I think, at this point. There's no finalized details as to what we will actually see for the next season. But Wargaming obviously is just trying to give the player base some heads up on the general ideas that they're looking at. So the first possible restriction that they're considering is limiting the number or the maximum number of identical ships that can be in a team that go into battle. So for example, they may say you cannot have more than 2 of the same ship on a team. It doesn't matter what the ship is, you can't have more than 2. This would certainly help address, or at least force teams to not have these very static builds for sure. This is probably the number one item. I should also note that these restrictions are not necessarily intended to be enforced throughout the entirety of a season. They may vary over time depending upon how the season is going, or just to provide some variety in terms of some of these restrictions. The next restriction would be a limit on the number of ships or number of particular ships in a team. So for example, they might say you can't have more than one Musashi, or you can't have more than one Kronstadt, or something like that. And then lastly, a restriction on picking any particular ships at all. So they might say your team cannot have any Alaskas, period, or Z-46s or something like that. So again, there's no finalized details here, just some concepts. And I think generally this is a good thing to help sort of encourage teams to be more creative in their team compositions. So the next item to cover is Brawls, which used to be called Clan Brawls. This is a very popular mode with the community, and obviously Wargaming's looking to keep it going. So they're going to update the format here, and there's no finalized details again as to what exactly we're going to see for 0.10.1. I see this more as a framework that's being announced starting with this update. So players will be able to participate either alone or in division. Brawls will have a short duration. These are typically done over weekends and obviously support small battle formats like 1 versus 1 or 3 versus 3. So a few other features. Again, Brawls last only for a few days, and they will only have Brawls happening during peak hours. So they won't have Brawls during low activity periods for each respective server. Next is that if you have no division, the teammates are selected randomly. Well, that basically just makes this random battles in some sense. When selecting allies, the tier and class of your ship are taken into account, and then teams can be asymmetrical. So, for example, you might have one team that has 1 battleship and 2 destroyers, and the other team has 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, and 1 destroyer. And then the next item is kind of interesting, but I wouldn't read in too much into it. It says the matchmaker tries to pick enemies close to your level of play. So this might be interpreted as some sort of skill-based matchmaking, but I don't think that's what Wargaming has in mind here. I think this is more look at the player's record for Brawls for that particular sprint or season and try to line teams or players up based on their records so that you have some level of balance between the teams. That's kind of my read here. Next item is obviously battles are conducted on maps with reduced combat areas and ships of only 1 tier. So some updates on Brawls, and again, like I said, this has been a very popular mode for many players. Next few updates, we have Wargaming's working on some changes to Key Battles, which was the event that took place during late October, traditionally associated with the Halloween period. They're adding some ships to the mode, and they're going to be making some other changes. So it looks like Wargaming's making some further investment here based presumably on player feedback that a lot of players, or at least some segment of the players, enjoyed these modes, and they're trying to make them more enriching. Next is some graphical updates. So we are going to get an improvement on how the sun reflects off of water. On the left-hand side of this image is how things look currently today, and then on the right is what they're planning. It does look like it's a little clearer with a little better fidelity. The next visual change is to the reticle, the aiming reticles of aircraft carriers. They're improving the contrast just to make them more visible. Again, the image on the left is what we have today, and the image on the right is what it's expected to look like. Next update is some ranked containers. So Wargaming will award ranked containers based on reaching rank 1 of respective leagues. There is a Bronze League container, Silver League, and Gold League container as well. I don't expect that any of these would be purchasable. These were obviously, like I said, award or reward containers. Next is we are going to get a couple of new unique Dasha Perova commanders, one for Italy and one for Europe. These are obviously ornamental to complement the other Dasha commanders that we have. And then lastly, we have an update on the steel camouflage, which currently can only be purchased for the Yamato, Shimakaze, and Des Moines. Wargaming is going to allow players to purchase a steel camouflage that they can apply to any Tier 10 ship of their choice. So this is very analogous to the New Year's camouflage or the epical camouflage that we've received over the last year that allows players to pick which ship they want the permanent camouflage to be applied to. So this is what it looks like on the Venezia. So some very interesting updates from Wargaming regarding update 0.10.1. Like I said, the big news here is the early access to the Italian battleship line, and a lot of players looking forward to that. So I hope you found the information here interesting and useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.